Right, we are talking Thor today, issue 340, the fourth and final part of the Ballad of Beta Ray Cyrus, Simon Waltinson's opening story arc. We have a tremendous cover here with Thor and Beta Ray Cyrus fighting a legion of demonic appearing aliens. Of the four-part story, three of them have had covers that people will hold up as some of the greatest Thor covers of all time. It's not just the covers either. Our interior art is equally as impressive throughout. Simon Waltinson brought so much new life to Thor's world. He emphasised the size and the quirkier designs, and it really paid off. It broke the Thor mould while also reappropriating a lot of the original Jack Quimby Thor approach with its monsters. Thor had maybe become too much of Buscema's baby. He was great, but he dialed down the more outlandish and weird with the dragons or the aliens so that they looked like they could coexist in the same world as the humanoid gods. That sounds too much like I am dissing Buscema, both of them too. But if you want me to properly diss something, here is the digital recolouring they did of this. That was how it looked when I first read it. That's how it looks when most people read it for the first time now. I wanted to show more of this in parts 2 and 3, but there's nothing that stands out too much in those issues beyond simply the fact that they recoloured it. Like this, there's nothing new that stands out there beyond that it has been recoloured in the same style as the other pages have been recoloured. And the thing is, as recolours go, it's objectively one of the better examples of it. They could have done it much worse, and Marvel and DC have done much more harmful digital recolours of things. It feels more like a pointless remaster with the Simon Waltinson Thor. There are some bits in this issue that I will further point out because I think they are particularly bad. But at least it was approaching the artwork with some cognizance that Simon Waltinson's line work was neither originally done with, and still shouldn't, be subject to an expansively enormous palette of gradient effects. There are bits where they've done that, and they are dire. But it's not every single page. Something like that Beta Ray Cyrus page just looks like it's maybe been overly polished rather than looking as vulgar as this page does. This is the first half of it, mostly an action issue. We have Thor, Beta Ray Cyrus and Steve taking the fight to the aliens that threaten Beta Ray Cyrus's planet. The action is excellently done. We have a battle in space. And something that struck me is that we never really do see Beta Ray Cyrus's race or its people much in this story or even after this. Then I realised we never had his origin retold or even recapped enough after this wherein we get to see it. We never really expand on his backstory or see how Beta Ray Cyrus became Beta Ray Cyrus. It is very interesting how Beta Ray Cyrus is a character that even casuals have some awareness of, but outside of this story, there isn't like another definitive Beta Ray Cyrus story arc. Anyway, here is this page recolored. It is another one where I hate it. They also had an inclination to randomly change certain colours. We will come to that. But the colour is such an important part of making Simon Waltinson's artwork stand apart. And the digital colours, it more often than not, doesn't work. His current stuff, there's at least some idea that he has thought of this when doing his art, but his original Thor run, he and the original colourist never was sat there thinking, you know what, these flats aren't working. I wish we had technology that could make things look glossier. But even his newer stuff, his newer work, it is coloured far better than the recolouring. And our Simon Waltinson is a pleasant, hard man, and he wouldn't have said anything about the Thor recolouring beyond endorsing it as a measure of professionalism. But it really doesn't seem like, a lot of the time, it understood the power of having a colour speak for itself. That is maybe the most pretentious thing I have ever said. Let the colour speak for itself. You need to improve your media literacy and get a better media diet. We are approaching the page where the colour chat is going to be overwhelming. Another plot element I want to bring attention to is that we never really learn anything about these aliens that they are fighting. We never learn their motivation or anything. We don't even learn their names, the name of the race. They are referred to as demons. They are aliens. But for all intents and purposes, you might as well view them as demons. Here is our monthly tease for Suture. He is still hammering away at his sword. That could be a euphemism for Suture having a wank, but he's just doing some smithing. Okay, here we are, the page. Before I get into the remaster, I will say Simon Waltinson is doing a terrific job of making Sieve and her part in this battle feel as important as Thor's and Beta Ray Cyrus's. Now you can see here on this page the important presence that colour plays. Some might say the lack of backgrounds is artistic weakness, but a bold red background denotes mood and feeling, anger, violence. Then our last panel makes use of shade and shadow, and this is to emphasise that Sieve is literally being overshadowed by summit off panel. Here's the recolour. Both those things that I highlighted have been removed. No semblance of the important storytelling with the shadow. No contrast with the red background. Instead we have detailed starfield backgrounds with a fading sky, which makes no real sense. This page makes me question if the colourist was reading the comics before recolouring them. The other thing, you see this a lot with recolours for no reason. Sieve's outfit has been recoloured. it has inverted the colour scheme. Why? What is the point of that? It's just changing it for the sake of changing it. What it is that is eclipsing Sieve is Beta Ray Cyrus's sentient ship. In the Recolouring, she just turned to look at it dramatically. Not because it cast a large shadow over her. Maybe you don't know this, but Noel Gallagher from Oasis, he actually wrote the song Cast No Shadow about Beta Ray Cyrus's ship. We also have Gimli, and he is still boring Agnar with stories about Baldric and the complicated backstory about Ragnarok. And we have this run's introduction to Aragorn. I won't repeat what I've said in past issues, but Simon Waltonson has waited 4 issues to give us another Fairyland character outside of the ones he set up in issue 1. I'm also about done bitching about the Recolouring. There is one more point I want to make about it, but I am going to try and be quite fair and provide some examples where it's not as disruptive and unaware as that last one. We have a great page here with a mirror image of Thor and Beta Ray Cyrus both throwing their hammers. And I love this page. And here is its remaster. I still don't prefer it, I will never prefer it, but I don't think it is anywhere near as bad as the page with Sieve. It is for a lot of the run. It feels pointless rather than damaging. There is also one very small window where a Recolouring can do something worthwhile. You see, we have this page where we cut away to Tom Hiddleston and Laura. And you would think that anyone daring to change a thing about Laura would earn my eternal wrath. But instead, look at Tom Hiddleston's cloak. It is miscoloured green on the panel on the left. You can see it's yellow on the next panel. It's meant to be yellow. Here's this page, and they have corrected that. This page also gives a better look at the Sieve colour. I don't like that they changed colours, but I do think the new colour scheme actually looks better, independent from its revisionism. The Masterworks retained the mistake with Tom Hiddleston's cape. And this is my final complaint about the Recolouring. Those versions, the recoloured versions, were, and still are, the main version of those issues available. I'm not just talking in collections, I mean as single digital issues. It is the Recouleurs. I am very adept at internet searching, so I have been able to find hard versions for about 80% of the run, and the Masterworks really helped fill that gap. If it wasn't for them, I would be saying 50% of the run at best. The Masterworks are cancelled, though. We are getting another volume of Thor, but we're not finishing the run. We are not getting new versions with restored colours for any of the issues in the second half of the run. We now probably never will. When they do release an epic collection, it won't be restored. It'll be those art files which I have sourced. There are often examples of colours being horrendously off in issues that have never been in the Masterworks. I showed a good example of how bad it can get in an issue of What If. Now our story is nearing its end. They have driven away the aliens and returned to fairyland. And we start to dig into a part of Beta Ray Cyrus's backstory that we hadn't before now. When he was transformed into cyborg raging horse Yerad, not only was it torture, when he came out of it as his people's champion, they were disgusted by the sight of him. They didn't want to look at him. I commented in the first and second part, I think some of the sympathetic pieces of Beta Ray Cyrus were later ideas when it turned out Beta Ray Cyrus had worked wonderfully from a marketing point of view. He had gotten a lot of new eyes on Thor. I would consider Sir Anthony Hopkins completely out of character here because he does something truly good and nice. He transfers the enchantment from Thor's magic hammer that would allow Thor to transform into a regular human to Beta Ray Cyrus's magic hammer. Another page where I don't think the recolouring is too horrible. This is the end of Donnie Wall Blake, for the record. I wish I could say we are done with that part of Thor's setup forever, but future runs will introduce other human hosts that get progressively more and more like Donnie Wall Blake until we just give up and bring Donnie Wall Blake back. So we get to see Beta Ray Cyrus can transform himself back into a regular Corbynite. That is his race. He's not a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, although he probably would be. Some later comics, very bad ones, give this form its own name. It's called Simon Waltonson. Welcome to a special Son of Capwolf Origins issue. That is where it came from. It makes no sense because presumably Beta Ray Cyrus was his name before he transformed into cyborg Beta Raging Cyrus. We also, I feel, rush things with Steve. She has chosen to go off with Beta Ray Cyrus, and she has feelings for him. And we did get a short scene last issue, and I feel that their relationship ends up better explored afterwards. But here it seems forced, rushing into splitting her from Thor. What I find worth mention is Beta Ray Cyrus doesn't really appear that much more in this run. You would think and assume that he does. He returns for the big Suture story, which is the milestone 350, and he lingers around for a few issues after that in subplots with Steve, eventually having his own issue where he fights Aluminium Man. He never really steals the show away from Thor, the way some might think would be the case. He appears in Powder Puff Patch, written by Lewis Simon, the connection being she and Simon Waltonson are married. And there's always been a beautiful handoff between his Thor run and their run on Extra Factor together, and then her work on Powder Puff Patch. Beta Ray Cyrus appears in a few Powder Puff Patch stories. He's almost the focus of that series, more than he is in Thor. I think the last time he appears in Simon Waltonson's run is the Secret Wilds I tie-in. That too crosses over into Powder Puff Patch. Beta Ray Cyrus has plenty of appearances after Simon Waltonson, and I will talk about them in a future video. But my last point here is I think it is incredible that Simon Waltonson never milked Beta Ray Cyrus. He could have had Beta Ray Cyrus show up in any book he wrote or drew. He could have had him join the Avengers. He could trot him out shamelessly in every story he did since. But he didn't. He never did. He probably gets his Beta Ray Cyrus fill from the constant stream of commissions featuring the character. And he will occasionally do variant covers for Thor with the character, but that is the extent of it. He did an interview with Diane Warren about Beta Ray Cyrus. There was a pun, by the way, a few sentences ago. Trot him out shamelessly. And he looks like a horse, doesn't he? We finished the issue with more setup for Fafnir. One of the two Fafnirs from Thor comics. I cannot call him Fafnir the Dragon, because the other Fafnir, the Giant, he also could become a dragon. I do not have all this run. I will let you know that now. I do have the next bit, the Fafnir story. But I think before then, I promised to go and do Tales of Fairyland, which actually works fantastically as a primer. That reprinted the Stanley Lee Jack Quimby backup stories that first featured Fafnir, this one, not the giant who can become a dragon. We have a letter over here from Artist Adams. Not a very good letter. It is always reaffirming when I have a couple of bad videos and then bounce back with something like this one. I think I did this alright. This is much better than DC Challenge. And the video is in accordance, much better than my video on DC Challenge. A great 4-part story here. A great beginning to a run. But a great 4-part story too. However you want to look at it, it's what Thor needed in the 80s and it's what Thor got. Some fresh blood that didn't ever betray what came before and instead took Thor to new heights. 7 thumbs up.